when I think about, teaching children, you are trying to motivate them. Adult learning theory really emphasizes this, that adults are, they're intrinsically motivated. They are motivating themselves to be there. To me, it was a big kind of pressure reliever almost because they want to be there, so they already have a foot in the door in terms of having a positive experience with whatever program course you're developing or working. Kids, right? It was a lot more learning about history and math but it's kind of math for the sake of math, right? It's kind of reading so that you can learn how to read so that eventually they can like write emails, attend meetings.
Let's get started on another fabulous episode of Edu Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, your host for today and for every time on this show. This show is not about your typical, oh, here's how we're growing the institution. This podcast is about people, the people behind the helm of institutions that are really successful in imparting education, how they're helping not just their institution, but what change are they making to the community outside and higher ed and K-12 in general. And that's what this podcast is about. And today we have another really amazing guest with us. We have Devon Winsor from Stanford University joining us. She's the Associate Director of Online Course Development at the School of Business, Business's Executive Education Program. I want to be very specific. Devon, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Amazing. You know what was one special thing about you that I want to share with our listeners here? Not every time do we meet somebody on the podcast who's in education at a school like Stanford, but whose entire career has been, in education all the way from like learning the different bits and pieces. So you started yours in education. You have a background in education as well. You work on education policy. You were an elementary school teacher, and I'm sure you learned a lot from there. You did your teacher certification from Johns Hopkins. Now you're working with Stanford. That's a lot of amazing, impressive things in your bio, all pertaining to education. So tell us where this stems from.
Thank you. Yeah, so I right out of college, I went to a small liberal arts school in North Carolina, and quite frankly, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. But I've always kind of had instilled in me this desire to make a difference, right? And with that, I was really drawn to a program called Teach for America,
Oh,
which,
sure.
yeah, you might be familiar. It recruits students kind of right out of college who are interested in the education space. Many students kind of go on, or many Teach for America core members go on to do things like become doctors or lawyers or other things. I know I actually saw a lot of us with desiring to go down that path. I really honestly intended to go to law school after. And
Mm.
then I just couldn't leave after my 2 years in the core with what I was seeing. So it was sort of a lucky, I was very fortunate to get in. And into the core, and it was a really, really incredible 2 years. And that definitely cemented my desire to stay in education.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the kind of kids you were working with while you were at Teach for America. Like,
Yeah, so honestly, some of the most incredible, most resilient kids I'll ever get to know.
that's awesome.
The program gets a lot of it definitely has, its critics, and with good reasoning. I definitely had no idea what I was doing my first year in the classroom. I was probably one of the like lowest performing teachers, even in the core initially. But with that, really um, I really used my students to inspire me to get better. And when you're at such a low point, there's just nowhere to go but up, I think. And, I unfortunately too, what in my school where I was teaching, and I'll definitely get to kind of the students that I was teaching in a second, but I was one of three first grade teachers. One of the other first grade teachers was also a core member with TFA. And then the third first grade teacher was a long-term substitute. So just to give some perspective on like that really does happen in these schools. And, when I think about the kids, they were all, underserved. I did my core experience in Washington, D.C., which was where I was also born and raised, which was really special because really close to where I grew up was just this really a lot of people really living in serious poverty. I mean, it was a food desert. DC has one of the most incredible, vibrant Black communities that I've ever experienced. I've lived in quite a few cities, and to me, just what I've experienced in DC and the Black community is so special. Most of the students, 99% of the students that I served were Black, and the head of the school would joke like we don't know what the 1% is because it was all Black students. And I was one of the only white teachers as well. So in that
Mm.
sense, I really got to dive into like what it means to what race means, how that impacts students, and all of that. So it was just such an incredible time, and the kids just really continued to inspire me.
And did that, Devin, intimidate you in any way that you were the only white
Oh
teacher?
my God, total. It did, and it did at first, but I have to say, Um, I made so many mistakes, like of things I would say that just because and things I would do that were just so not right. I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I made some of these mistakes, even like with kids. And but I was in a community that was so it invested in my growth, as weirdly as that sounds. I was obviously invested in my students' growth, but also a community that was really invested in seeing me grow as a teacher, as an educator, as someone who needed to gain a much deeper understanding of these communities in order to be able to teach effectively in the communities. I mean, my second year of teaching was much more successful, not as much because the content was always easy for me, that I understood how to get through to kids and that with when it came to the content. But the real unlock was understanding the community and being able to gain the trust of students and teachers around me. And that came
Love
with,
it.
yeah, so that definitely came with me making mistakes, having a safe place to make mistakes, and them feeling comfortable to correct me, right? It goes both ways.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Devin. I have many more questions there, but I do want to talk to you first about how all of that influenced your decision to get into higher ed, and especially online. Because I personally am a big fan of online learning, right? It started with the whole shebang of MOOCs and all
Yeah.
of that, and it kind of now is kind of declined a little bit in terms of the interest levels of right how people perceive online education versus in person and how companies and employers perceive it. Before we get into all of that, what led you to get into higher ed and Stanford specifically? Did the opportunity just show up, you applied, or like you were looking for it? Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually came to Stanford to get my master's in education policy and organizational leadership after 4 years of teaching. So that was kind of how I got into the Stanford ecosystem, if you will. And my last year of teaching was during COVID. So I actually taught third graders online. And that was when I really began to see, I kind of was like, a lot of teachers really struggled, and I recognized that it was really, really challenging. I I had a somewhat positive experience actually in the grand scheme of things. I realized that, this it was doable for sure. I will say I also had students who could read, so that was different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, being that age group, but I really enjoyed it, and I really came to really love exploring what tools I could use what every day for my students to get through in a different way, to make it exciting for them, so on and so forth. Also, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There's a picture where you see like a school 100 years ago and a school today, and it looks almost exactly the same,
That's
right?
right.
That's
Yeah.
a whiteboard. So that was really what sparked me to go to Stanford to get my master's in ed policy and organizational leadership. Was I really wanted to make a change and make a positive impact. Initially, quite frankly, I went with the intent to stay in the K-12 space. Um, but I, ended up going with this kind of desire to also understand how can we change this, especially when it comes to technology.
Hmm.
And I know you've been to Stanford a few times. I believe we spoke about previously, and so you see
Yes.
here how that entrepreneurial spirit, that kind of real belief in technology and always being on the cutting edge of things is just runs through Stanford's core. I mean, you can't leave the camp. You can spend a day on the campus and still get that feeling. And so having spent, a year studying it, that was became really strong. And so I applied to this position not as much with the intent, not as much with the higher ed interest, but more with that kind of online interest and that desire to really understand how can this be done really effectively, especially for adults, because as you pointed out, MOOCs are a failure. I mean, they're there and they're great. You have, I think, you know, I'm not going to get into the kind of completion rates of some of those MOOCs. They're shockingly
Yeah.
low.
They are
Um,
low. Yeah.
yeah, and so something that Stanford, I was really excited to be a part of was at Stanford with the executive education program, specifically our flagship online program lead, seemed to have really cracked the code in terms of creating an online program that was really, really impactful. And so just wanting to be a part of that and in general, that's kind of what led me more into the online space in this role.
Got it. And I definitely sense that based on everything you've said, right? Like a school 10 years ago or even 10 decades ago was similar to how it is now. Uh, just generally, like working in education myself for so many years, I feel like it's kind of like a slow moving space, right? Compared to a lot of these other industries where there's technology. But is that like when I look at your progression, right, you went from K-12 to doing online, which I think is way fast moving if it's done right, right? And within that, you're also at Stanford, which is like helm of technology and innovation. So do you think you probably already are in many ways, but you want to play that part in making education faster, more accessible and effective?
So definitely more accessible and effective. Here's
Yeah.
the thing about the speed of education. And this is why I think it's different from a lot of other industries. Education, you're right, it moves really slow. Quite frankly, I was shocked at how it even moves slow in my role. And me just trying to, I don't think I've kind of suggested anything particularly cutting edge or innovative yet,
Mm.
in any of the programs or courses that I've developed. Um, I think though, because, and this especially applies to K-12, when you think of innovating, you're innovating on those are lives that are impacted, right? That's someone's future. So if you get it wrong, the implications are so serious. Whereas, if there's a tool out there and maybe if there's a tool that's used separately from education, let's say like a wellness product, and you use it and it doesn't work, okay, like fine, I can continue on with my life, right? In school, if I try to teach math a certain new way, or if I implement this tool in this curriculum and it doesn't work, that whole that whole all did the learning go through? We don't know. Like, that has implications, real implications for students. So
It
that's why
does,
I
yeah.
think it's so slow. And so I have mixed feelings about it. I have mixed feelings about it speeding up or going faster. But
Completely agree. Yeah.
well, I'm the other part of that though is that we see private schools which they are able to innovate. And some of those schools are considered the best in the country. They have college placement and Ivy, significant college placement compared to some other public school. It's just tricky. It's there are pros and cons to it.
Oh, totally. And I totally agree. And I also feel like if there's innovation happening outside education, like institutions get to know it after the fact, right? So now, okay, there's any,
Exactly.
yeah, and now they have to go through this whole cycle of either training, reskilling staff, upskilling staff, or hiring new staff, then creating a curriculum for it, then pitching it to the market students. So there's already just an inherent delay in them even getting information. So,
And it's so true. And this is true with higher ed and with K-12. You can do all of the things to make it something great. What's going to happen is that faculty member, that teacher is going to close the door and do what they want.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
really interesting to think about. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And what do you feel about, I mean, especially in K-12, right? The churn rate. I mean, there's roughly about 10% of teachers who leave the industry every year, and they either get some other job or don't work. But that 10% churn is very hard for the for K-12 to replenish that. What do you attribute a lot of that to, just from the experiences you've had?
Yeah, honestly, I'm surprised it's not higher. I teaching was the best job in the world. It was absolutely unsustainable. There was no way I could have done it for more than the 4 years than I did.
Yeah.
I think that just it really has to do with there's been a lot of research that's disproved the pay theory, right? Teachers are not paid very well, and there's been a lot of research that really says it's not about the money. I will say for myself and a lot of my friends who were teaching, we sort of disproved that theory. Like it that was a factor that led us out of the classroom.
Sure.
However, I think just it is not sustainable for other reasons. And I think one of them being, the lack of flexibility around your time during the school year. I was so sick of hearing, oh, but you get summers, you get these great breaks. It's winter break was like recharge. I mean, I was not about to go on some nice vacation. And
Yeah.
summer was great, but what if I have a friend getting married in the middle of March? Or, if let's say I had a child and they were at a different school and they're on a different system, there's no work from home flexibility, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
I think that the lack of flexibility is a big piece. The pay is a big piece, and then it's just an emotionally charged environment when you're dealing
Right.
with kids, their parents, your principal. There's a lot of, having the type of school leader that you're working under really impacts your experience. I saw like I think somewhere between 4 and 6 principals my first 2 years of teaching come and go. And that's a big reason why teachers didn't stay. We just never really knew what we were going to get. And so I think those factors, the leadership, the lack of flexibility, and the pay for me are what hold true. But
That's very honest and fair. Yeah, I get it. And I mean, K-12, you're dealing with kids. Every day you go in there, you come back, I'm sure you don't even want to talk to anybody for the rest of the evening. You're
yeah,
done.
it's I don't know. I had some friends who were teachers and parents as well. And I was just like, how do you do it? And they always it's different when it's your own kid and they would say things like that. But I truly, exactly what you said, I would come home and I did not want to talk. I was tired. Yeah.
That's crazy, yeah, and I get it. But there's so much. I'm sure you also come home with smiles because like you had this kid do this funny thing or something you weren't expecting. Yeah, that's the thing with kids. My wife and I always talk about it. Like it's great to have kids. It's also great to not have kids. Like there's no right answer.
There are pros and cons to each. That is very true.
All right. How has that changed at Stanford? Now you're dealing with adult learners online, an institution that's well funded, knows its place in the market. It's up there. Um, in the
Yeah.
top three. Yeah. How's that change?
Honestly, it's a total shift, right? So when I think about, teaching children, you are trying to motivate them. Adult learning theory really emphasizes this, that adults are, they're intrinsically motivated. They are motivating themselves to be there. So that takes kind of to me, it was a big kind of pressure reliever almost because you're not they want to be there, so they already have a foot in the door in terms of having a positive experience with whatever program course you're developing or working on, right? um in addition to that, so I think that the importance of creating an experience for adults that's relevant to them and that they can implement, like that they could see themselves implementing that day, is much more important for adults than it was for kids. For kids, right, it was a lot more learning about history and math, but it's kind of math for the sake of math, right? It's kind of reading so that you can learn how to read so that eventually they can like write emails, attend meetings. I don't know. I always tried to tie it back
Sure.
into kind of
Yeah.
their real life, but with adults, it's a lot more important in order to keep them there, and to for them to have an experience, especially within executive education. These people do not have the time to, spend even an extra 10 minutes of their time with things that aren't relevant to them, or listening to content that they might already know, or that even just if it doesn't apply, or even that might not apply to them. So the stakes were higher, a lot higher in that sense, in this role, for just creating experiences that are relevant and also unique. I mean, that's just the expectation of what we're creating here.
That's amazing. And I'm sure, I mean, I've dealt with students at Stanford and been part of some programs there. And I know that when people even look at Stanford, apply for something, the expectation is like way up there, right? Like every minute that they're going to get something new, information that they can keep. So they're very demanding too. A lot of the learners at Stanford are very demanding. So I'm sure you really you seem to be getting a lot of energy out of that too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. I mean, it's just the team that I have here within Exec Ed. It's been a really amazing experience so far. I feel very lucky.
Do you, I mean, at Stanford, I'll probably combine these questions. I mean, Stanford does programs that sometimes cost a lot of money, but they also do a lot of programs and certification. There's stuff that my friends have said they've taken on LinkedIn, Stanford certifications that were free of cost. Yeah, we're talking Stanford here. The level of education is high, which means the type of people who build programs, who teach programs, I mean, these are all extremely high profile and they all get to need to get paid as well. So I mean, Stanford's really got a good balance around its revenue generation and the quality that it gives back, and I love it. Yeah, I think what I've seen is not coming from the GSB for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Stanford as a
but
university, I think does a really great job of
yeah,
making programs and like experiences accessible. If you want to do something and you need the money to do it, there is probably a way to get the money to do it, from whether if it's a degree program, for sure some sort of scholarship. If it's a certificate program, reaching out to, the team that's kind of managing whatever that certificate program is. It's likely there, and the opportunity is likely available to you. It just takes maybe a little extra effort. I do think Stanford as a university does a great job with that. It's just
mm,
a little bit, trickier um, within our department. The level of expectation, and also, we want to make sure that people come to the programs invested, ready
sure.
to give their best effort, and that's important as well.
That's amazing. So we've talked about the journey. If you had to piece it together for anybody who's in K-12, right, or teaching, to be able to get into online course and curriculum development at a large university, would you recommend the steps that you took to get there? Or would you, now when you look back, you'd say, oh no, I should have done something slightly different?
You know, That's that's a great question. If someone looked at my resume, I think they might actually find it quite random. Like I did, I just to be honest, I did not foresee having, I did not foresee going into higher ed or having such an amazing experience in higher ed, like the one that I've had. So I will say that. I also do think that my role is really unique, and I haven't found anything that exists like it at other universities. So I think what you just
Mm,
said is important, and this is where I would kind of start to guide someone if they asked me this, or if they were thinking about getting into higher ed and learning design. I'd say, are you interested in learning design, or are you interested in kind of business development or something else? Because we have a team of learning designers that's actually technically separate from my team, although I work with them closely. Um, and, that's one path that you could go. And in that case, K-12 and teaching, I would say that's a pretty linear path. You're teaching,
mm,
you're probably creating your own curriculum, go to school, get some sort of stamp on it to show that you can really do it, create a curriculum that you can show to potential employers when you apply to jobs, and then you can likely get a job in higher ed in terms of curriculum design. Um,
mm.
I think that when it comes to, a role like mine, though, I know when my boss hired me, one thing she had said was she was like, you really bring that innovation piece. And that's what I'm really looking forward to you bringing to the team, was what kind of she had communicated to me at the time. And that, like, it's in that case, I think COVID for me really allowed me to shine in that way,
Interesting.
unfortunately and fortunately,
Yeah.
as did certain projects that I took on when I was a master's student at Stanford that she had seen when I was applying to the role. Um, and so in that sense, I would say that, but again, like my role is so unique that it's tricky to say, like, yes, take this path. Yeah. Yeah.
Did they have the role already and you filled somebody else's shoes, or they just created it based on your profile?
No, 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 no. They did have the role already, but if it I it just how the department was set up at the time was really, from what I've gathered in terms of how other universities work, was pretty unique. And so the role itself is unique in that I'm sort of 30% learning designer, I'd say 40% product, like in program or project manager, and then kind of maybe 30% just like whatever they need me to do, I do, right? And that's unique. And it's why I love the job, but
Yeah.
it's different.
Awesome. I feel it also takes a little bit of a bold move to get out of your comfort zone, right? I mean, you were an East Coast girl and you were in K-12, right? And then you're like, no, I'm going to Stanford, leave everything here. And a
Thank
lot of it
you.
just becomes that, right? So
You know,
congratulations to you for doing that.
I don't, are you from the West Coast
Uh,
or,
Initially East Coast, so yeah,
okay.
Boston. I lived in
So you,
Boston, comfort zone, you know.
yeah, you get
Uh,
it. I was deciding between Stanford and Harvard when I was deciding between my master's programs, and I'm from the East Coast, like very East Coast family, and they could not, like the fact that I was even thinking about it, about coming out to the West Coast to go to Stanford was baffling to
yeah.
them, let alone choosing Stanford. And then, and I'm like, come on, guys, it's not that bad. It'll be okay. And then when I decided to stay out here and like you said, pivot, it definitely it was a real adult moment for sure.
Right, yeah.
Felt great.
It is a mind shift. Yeah, it has to be, especially when you're going to California. Everything's so expensive. Like you got to be in the right job, make the right money.
Yeah, it is. And
You
it
know.
is really just a different, I mean, but it is so true. I would say for anyone who's listening that is interested in that innovation piece when it comes to education, I mean, to me, it's just happening out here in a way that with so many people who are so excited and passionate about it, I just didn't see that when I was on the East Coast. To be completely honest. It was a lot more interest in policy. Like I was in DC, there's a lot more, what can we do kind of nationwide, or at the district level, things like that. But I just kept seeing how whether it's higher ed policy or K-12 policy, it just it policy doesn't always actually have direct impact on an educational institution. I just saw it over and over again. And so yeah, that definitely contributed to my pivot out here as well.
So true. Yeah, I mean, I go there a lot. I've got investors in the valley and for the business I run, and yeah, I definitely see the pace when I go there. And now we're in Salt Lake City, also like really coming up. A lot of ed tech, a lot of Californians moved here during COVID, so like you kind of see that. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no, sorry to interrupt. It's a hub, it's becoming a hub for ed tech companies now,
It
no?
is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I sometimes just thank my stars because we came here because we thought it's a great place to live, good balance, work-life balance, there's skiing and outdoorsy things, but you can also affordably set up your company. But then, yeah, in the last like 4 years or so, it's turning into a really good place for edtech. So I love it.
Yeah, no, a big part of my role is just I talk to ed tech companies every day just to kind of see what's going on, make sure that I'm aware of what the trends are. And so many of them are based in Salt Lake. So
The
yeah,
latest. Yeah. Actually, yeah. I don't know if you've heard of Degreed based out of Salt Lake.
I've heard
Uh,
of Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah, they're in the
they're
online
big,
space.
no?
They're big. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the founder, David Blake, he's a really close friend of mine. He's actually on my board. Amazing person, I think, for you all to connect. It would be great. Yeah,
Oh, amazing.
I can make that happen. But yeah, no, some great companies, instructors here. Yeah, and hopefully, iSchool also gets in that like elite list soon.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure it will.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Devin, but this has been great in terms of just understanding your progression and helping our listeners understand how do you transition, especially K-12 to higher ed, online, important questions that people are asking, right? Talk to us about oh, the final thing that I want to talk about is the team and the people you work with. What part do people play in your success and how you're doing things today?
That's such a great question. And I'm so happy I have the opportunity to speak on this because I will say I would not be where I am if it was for my colleagues at all of my previous roles. This one especially though, I think, I work with just it feels like some just really incredibly smart people who are really passionate about exec ed, which I love because, as my passion was initially K-12, and I've really begun to develop this understanding and similar passion for the importance of executive education and making a difference, how understanding how leadership can really make a
Hmm.
difference in an organization. And I think that that's something that everyone at Stanford Exec Ed on our kind of small but mighty team really shares. And especially, whenever whether it's creating a program for like a client or creating a new program for kind of maybe a certain demographic or something like that, it's just this shared desire to put out a product and create something that is best in class. that's that that's a culture, right? And that starts from our dean and that carries through. And so when it comes to who you work with, I think that that's everything. That's a really, really, to me, that's just been such an important part of my growth in this role and previous roles. So I know, for your folks listening, if sometimes you can also seek out mentorship. That's something that I've done is
You
just,
said it.
yeah, like ask. I mean, I think folks, I love feedback, and that comes from my first year of teaching when I was so horrible. I just needed, like, I was so humbled. I just needed any help I could get. That's really for me carried through, but not being afraid to ask, what can I do better? And also, what am I doing well? So I can lean into that. You can ask your manager that. You can ask your a colleague that. I think that that's really important, and that's something that is really prevalent in in our culture too.
I love it. And you said it. It's funny because yesterday I was talking to one of our teammates, and he said, "What's the number one thing you feel, number one reason for, you to progress the way you're progressing?" And I said, "Oh, the number one reason, hands down, it's having the right mentor."
Yeah.
Uh,
And
yeah.
it's and there's so much research that shows, I believe Harvard came out with a study a few years ago that showed, for kids who are, perhaps underserved or struggling, there isn't this need for this, what we envision as a traditional American family unit of like a father, a mother, or whatever.
Yeah.
Really, students just need one person in their corner, right? And I think I mean, granted, I've seen that study I've seen that really play out in all of my roles, in especially in K-12 with my students. But that for me has really held true, like you said, throughout my career too. It's just, I really owe I really owe a lot of people just everything in terms of where I am today, for sure.
That's pretty amazing. And I people for me are the number one reason why I do what I do, and even the podcast. It's all, yeah, because what's the point otherwise, right? And then I love to transition that question into AI
Oh yeah,
because
big part of my role. 'Cause I
yeah,
was
okay,
wondering.
fabulous. Big
Yeah.
part of my role too. I mean, building a company, working with people, but we're also automating enrollment for schools using AI. So, how is that transition happening for you? And do you think, especially with online education, right, like
Yeah.
that impact it must be already there for you. So, talk to us about it.
Okay, so a few things. It's interesting. When I think about AI, I was sort of given the a framework to work within when I'm choosing ed tech tools for us to use, right? Our dean once told me, the dean of Exec Ed, he's awesome, but he said, make sure that the product is best in class and tried and true. And with AI, that kind of goes out the window, right? Because a best in class might have just been developed a month ago. A tried and true, yeah, it works, but is it gonna be best in class in a year? We don't really know. So that's been really
So
interesting.
true.
Yeah, really, that's been a big part of what I've been doing is trying to stay on top of where we are with it, what is out there, that is ready to be learner facing. I actually have to say, Ashish, I have been pretty disappointed
Mm,
with tools that are learner ready. But I'm in a unique position where I can't have a tool that will glitch, right? Or have sort of an error come up or something that we don't know, because folks are paying a lot for our programs, and B, the tool has to work. We have to
yeah,
deliver a course that says, well,
yeah.
it's going to do what it's going to do, right?
Stanford
So
quality. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And a lot of tools, because they're it's such a quick, fast changing pace, space, and because they're kind of being newly developed. It's been quite rare that I found a tool that's ready for prime time. I'm seeing a lot of tools get developed for that are geared towards learning design, more of the back end, right, of what you were describing, where automating enrollments, helping to develop courses, kind of that learning design piece. I could feed it a lesson and it could maybe feed me out some ideas of how to show that lesson to learners. But in terms of tools that are actually learner facing, we're seeing a lot of
yeah,
chatbots as tutors, and then also AI to check assignments, but not necessarily grade assignments. And I still haven't found a tool that I think is really there that I think could like really provide effective feedback for
mm,
learners on an assignment. If you know of one, please let me know because I would
no.
love that. Yeah,
People have been trying to solve it for a long time now. Yeah,
yeah. And that was, were you at ASU GSV this year?
of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that was sort of AI was the big theme, and
Yeah.
quite a few people said what I was thinking and what I'm saying now, which is there was all of this buildup, like, oh my goodness, it's going to change it so much, it's going to change it so much. A classroom is still desks and a whiteboard, right? A
Yeah.
lot of online learning is still is not
Zoom.
still Zoom. Yeah, really. And so, and I think that that's because a lot of those tools aren't there yet. So, I think it will change the space. It's just a matter of the tools being developed, the learner facing tools being developed that are that just need to be ready for go.
Totally, totally agree with you. And that's how I feel as well, you know. So whenever I talk to customers or anybody about AI, I'm always talking about the human in the loop. I'm like,
Yeah.
stop thinking about building a fully autonomous like machine that can do things tomorrow. Like give it some time, maybe it'll happen. But as of now, you have to focus on a pipeline that has humans in it. Uh,
Yep.
yeah, because it misses a lot of things. Misses the mark on empathy, of course, we know that, but it also misses the mark on accuracy. Like, yeah, there's a lot
It
of,
does. And the implications on institutions when it does miss the mark on accuracy are significant.
oh yeah, can
So,
lead to a lawsuit even.
yeah, 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 quite literally. So it's something that and but again, it's not to diminish. It really has had a positive impact though on that back end of things. So it was things that learners might not see, but a lot has been automated in terms of processes that has sort of freed up our time for this for other innovative things to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yes, I agree with you. And you know, in simple functional things, it's moved the needle a lot. I mean, a lot of that work actually comes out of Stanford. So, you know,
yeah,
we know that. I mean, Nvidia and all these companies are going crazy and they're doing so well. Uh,
they are.
yeah.
Now, I have to ask, what do you think though about learners using AI for assignments?
Yeah. Y- y- Oh, that's such a deep question that I think about all the time. And here's my one feeling of that. I like the pace at which people can accomplish tasks when they use AI. And I think it's okay to learn, just like we learn tools to make our lives efficient. Like instead of doing math on paper, now we use calculators or a computer. Great. AI is similarly a tool, and great that it's making everybody efficient. But I think it should be moved a little beyond the learning phase. Like when you're at school and you're learning, you should be learning some of it as the very bare bones rubric. How do you do it without technology? Because what I fear for the human race, like talking really high level, what I fear is that over time, our brains are going to just slow down in terms of our ability to actually think and innovate because we'll start relying on machines. I mean, we're
Yeah,
already at a point where like ChatGPT can think way beyond like most people, right? When it
yeah.
comes to writing content. So we're going to keep relying more and more on it, and our brain function, I think, as a human race, like it's going to slow down, and I fear that, like really fear that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I
What do you feel?
I know I think about it's funny. I think whether we like it or not, people are going to be writing their essays with AI. And so that needs to be that needs to be adjusted in higher ed, K-12, all curricula.
Yeah.
Someone was saying, what a student got in trouble or something for writing an essay with using ChatGPT to help them write an essay.
Yeah.
And someone, kind of an advocate had said, well, there's this tool that can do this for them now. They're not going to have to do this anymore. Like this is kind of becoming a skill that is not as relevant. But
I
it's so
know.
hard because what I think isn't captured is writing an essay seems perhaps irrelevant, but what it means is exactly what you described. Your brain is moving. It's thinking creatively. It's thinking, how do I bridge these two ideas together in a thoughtful way, right? And that's forming all of these neural pathways that are so important and might not otherwise get formed if you're not actually doing the work. But
Yeah.
it's tricky because at the same time, uh, it's just what students are going to do. And so I think that understanding, I mean, in general, it's a boring answer, but understanding how to work with it as opposed to having it do the work for you, I think is the way it'll eventually end up being.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I cannot quote the exact number because I don't remember, but I was reading one research article that came out of UPenn that talked
Mm.
about how much in the last 3 decades the human ability to do math has gone down. It's like gone down by like 45% or something because we don't have to do that.
Oh. Because of like calculators?
Yeah, because
And
we don't rely like when we have to randomly set like, oh yeah, okay, if we take so many people, put it here, this times this, how much money are we spending? Today we cannot do that kind of math without a calculator.
that's so true. I mean, I could, it would take us, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
much longer, right? Versus like, yeah, like uh, 2, 3 generations ago, like people could do that kind of math. Like if I was I'm talking to my sales team about like a math on sales, like, okay, if we get 3 customers, okay, we got to deploy 10 people, okay, it's gonna cost us 3,000 a month. By the time I hit like the fourth or fifth question, I need a calculator.
Yeah.
And I feel like with ChatGPT and everything, yeah, I don't want us to go there, But you're right. Like they're never gonna need to write an essay, yes. And I feel I wouldn't be surprised, Devin, if you'll launch a program soon that's like a certificate program in prompt engineering for chat.
I know. I know.
Like, because now it's literally about just you should know how to ask the right questions to chat GPT and it's going to give it to you,
Yep.
right?
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, but amazing. I'm glad we kind of ended with this conversation on the future, and I hope a few years down we talk again and we say, oh, that fear we had, no, it's not true. Yeah, we're actually going in the right direction, and I hope so.
Me too. I hope so as well.
That's awesome. Devin, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I think this was a great, great conversation, especially for a lot of our listeners who are thinking about transitioning into higher ed, who are in K-12, transitioning into online schools like Stanford. You answered a lot of questions. Thank you very much.
So glad. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Fabulous. And thank you to all our listeners for joining another episode of Edu Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, and our special guest for today, Devon Winsor from Stanford. Thank you, everybody.